I knew I was looking up. Hold up. Oh, I thought there was a. That's not it. Okay, I'll quit. Why do I have to put it in the background, then bring it back up for it to show? I have a hunch that the video file is preventing everything from loading. We could probably call you home. Shoot. I probably should have. Hold up. Did a proper rename. Damn, Lord. What's going on? Gambler. So, what other streamers do you subscribe to? I think it'll be sad if I'm the only person that you subscribe to. Let me listen to a podcast. Who has Mark Seaman been on any more podcasts? I respect the heck out of him. Hold up. Everything is 2020. Let's listen to Mark Seaman.
This episode sponsored by Copado. Copado is the first Salesforce delivery management solution and the #1 native DevOps platform for Salesforce. Copado makes the jobs of Salesforce admins and developers
I'm
fun and
basically
easy,
subscribed to tons
doing
of
the
music
largest and
streamers.
most complex
Plus, as far
work.
as I know, one
Plan and
Java, one
collaborate
Clojure,
on
and one C
work,
Sharp
then
Dev. But
track
those
your
are more or
changes
less
right
never
on the user
online when
story
I
with an admin-friendly Git interface.
got it.
Automate development and testing and track metrics so that you can target improvements. Copado DevOps 360 brings advanced analytics such as value stream mapping, executive summaries, and rich interactive dashboards. These insights help you find inefficiencies and delight your users by delivering innovation faster than ever. Take the pain out of the Salesforce development process and make Salesforce development fun again with Copado.
Hello, everybody. This is Shi Xiao. This
Where
is
is.
yet a new
Hold up.
episode of Salesforce Web Podcast. Today, I'm sitting with a wonderful guest with me. His name is Mark Seaman. Hello, Mark.
Hello. Good to be here.
Yeah, Mark. So, would you like to introduce yourself?
Oh, gee, I can try. So my name is Mark, and I live in Copenhagen, Denmark, which is where I'm calling in from right now. And I've been doing software development for, gee, 20, 25 years, something like that. I actually started out, I have a university degree in economics, so I was not really,
Where is this
wasn't really
banner at? Hold up.
in my plans to become a software developer. And then I sort of just stumbled on software development in the mid 1990s and then thought, hey, this is much more fun. So I basically just started doing that instead.
Where is this at?
It was sort of like a gradual shift from, I actually started out
Oh,
working
Toolkit
in the
Media
Ministry of
Element.
Economic Affairs.
So what happens if we
I used
comment
higher
this
education a
media
little bit, and
element
then I
out?
sort of
Will my page
transitioned
load?
into software development from there. So exactly how many years of software development experience I have it's a little bit fuzzy around the edges because it's sort of gradually transitioned into that, but it's definitely more than 20 years. I got my first job where it said software developer as the title in 1999. So it's been a while, but I did software related things even before then. Yeah, so it's been some time.
Yeah. So Mark, I went into your Pluralsight courses. It's about the solid principle, right? You teach people how to write object-oriented programming language,
That's
how
right.
to design those stuff. Yeah. And you got almost 2,000 ratings with the average of 4.5 out of 5. That's like amazing, I just wondered how much money does this guy get from this one single course?
I'm not sure that I'm allowed to speak about that, actually.
Yeah, it's fine. But, that's the first impression. I get convinced, okay, let's really check what's the course content. And the solid was something I really wanted to learn, but it's always in the book.
Hold up. Let me
I know what it's
first
about.
make sure that
really use them
I check in whatever changes.
Especially in the real life when we are busy, we're writing the code for the customers,
The miscellaneous,
for Salesforce developers.
Right.
So that's the reason I want you to, to come into my show and even have a conversation about it. So solid, I understand it's like a 5.
So you said recently started to listen again to the On the Metal Oxide computer podcast, just tons of loose chat about computer history. Of course, I really enjoyed the one with Jonathan Blow, just because I still have a warm heart. I take it you meant to say warm hearts. I still have a warm heart for game development. Yeah, I think what's his name? Sean and I talked about game development. He mentioned John Blow, which I thought was a cool Hollywood name, John Blow. But I'll check it out.
Separate principles that combined with the first letter SOLID, right?
That's true.
But it sounded very like academic things. It's like only the professors in the university wanted to study that.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. Okay. So I think the first thing we need to be sure that everyone understands is that I completely get the point where if it feels like you're very busy, you may not feel that you have the time to dive into what you say. It sounds like it's more like an academic thing, but it's not really intended to be particularly academic, and it didn't actually grow out of universities. It's quite a practical set of principles that originally Robert C. Martin tried to put into some rules of thumbs. But I think what's really important here is that you probably you tend to have more than one goal when you are a software developer, because obviously you have this short-term goal that if your customer is asking you when is the next feature done, that's your short-term goal. And those solid principles, those principles of object-oriented design, they're probably not going to help you reach that immediate goal.
Still not loading.
Feature in 1 week or in 2 weeks. But on the other hand, if you know that you have to work on the same code base for years and years and years, you may also have experienced this phenomenon where, when the code base is young, you can deliver new features fairly quickly. But then as the code base grows older and older, it becomes harder and harder to add new features, because every time you try to add a feature, every time you try to fix a bug, something else breaks somewhere else in the code base because everything's sort of connected to everything else. So, that's why we call it spaghetti code, is because if you try to, pull in one, place, it affects something completely different in the code base.
Is that one type of technical debt, so-called?
It might definitely be, a type of technical debt. So we, a good textbook or a good, course about the solid principles should always start by saying what I'm about to say now, is that you should only use those principles if you actually have the problem that they address, because the solid principles aren't sort of like a fix-it-all set of rules. They're there to fix particular problems, particularly around maintainability of code bases that tend to live for a little bit of a longer time.
Then what kind of problems does it really solve if we just want to immediately gain attraction on people?
Right. Yeah. So I think one of the problems that it solves is exactly this problem of diminishing returns, where it gets harder and harder to add new features. So if you follow those, they're also known as the principles of object-oriented design. So if you follow those principles, if you do it right, it should become easier to add new features later on. So without breaking the features that are already there. With all sorts of caveats and sort of where you say, well, okay, it doesn't, it's not a solve-all fix, but it might just make it easier to maintain your code base in the middle to long run.
But what you just mentioned, it sounds like when your code is rigid, which means it's really hard to move around when the customer has new requirements, which usually is the case, right? Along the project, the customer change ideas, and you tell them back that, sorry, I can't change that because this or that, which is a sign your code is already rigid.
Yes,
right?
Yes, exactly.
And it could be something else, like you just already mentioned. When you change something here, then something else breaks. It's like your code is really fragile, right?
Yeah.
So it's really hard to touch it. And maybe also because in the code, there's this so-called complexity, right? If you have a lot of if-else and the nested things, it's really hard to understand. So those things are also maybe part of these things, the solid principle trying.
Yes, right. Yeah. So I probably spoke at a little bit of a too high of a level of abstraction, but as you just mentioned, one of the symptoms you see is that a lot of long methods that may run on for hundreds of lines of code, and with lots of nested if statements where you have if and a for loop inside of the if statement and another if statement inside of the for loop and then another for loop and so on. You probably see those. We've all seen that sort of code. And what often happens in that sort of code is that there are lots of different responsibilities that are sort of mixed in together with each other. So you may have some responsibilities where part of that code goes and looks something up in a data store somewhere, and then another part of that code puts renders something on the screen, or performs some sort of business calculation, and it's all sort of mixed in together.
How do I force to redraw the
It's really
page?
hard to figure out if you need to change one of those things. You sort of need to figure out, which parts of the code do I actually have to change there?
Okay. So Mark, let's start with the single responsibility principle, because it's the S, right?
Yes.
So, if we pull everything into one conversation here, then people get confused. Let's just start one by one. I understand point is that the 5 principles in Solid, you have to learn them and apply them all together in your daily life. Then you get the most benefit out of that.
Right.
But for the learning purpose, it's better. Maybe we go through one by one. So let's start with the first S, which is the single responsibility principle. When I need to change something, I only need to go to one class. So one class is only responsible for one thing, which is the Unix principle, right? In the Unix world.
That fits pretty well with the do one thing and do it well principle. Yes.
Okay. Because in Salesforce, we are familiar with one thing called separation concerns, which was mentioned by Martin Fowler at the beginning. So we know in Salesforce, we always separate as like a service layer, domain layer, select layer, and then we kind of in each layer we have multiple small classes responsible for certain responsibility. So for this so-called single responsibility principle, we are kind of familiar, and we really use this separation of concerns to drive our design of our code.
Sounds good.
But one thing I really hear is that if we do this, then we end up with many small files in our even a small solution.
Yeah.
Comparing to before, we just put everything into a couple of classes. Then is it better with the small files?
Right. Yeah. So this is a question I actually do get from time to time, and I completely understand where it's coming from. Often when you're trying to get an idea about, how is the code base organized, lots of people start to look at the file, the list of files. And then if you see, as you just suggested here, if you see hundreds of files in a list, that looks like it's really overwhelming. But I think it's a little bit of a mental hurdle you just have to get over. If you have all of that spaghetti code that we talked about before, you might have files where when you open it, it's 10,000 lines of code. But you only have like 10 of those files, and then people say, "Oh, that's a nice code base. That's only 10 files," even though you have 100,000 lines of code there. But if you have 200 files of code, even though each of them is just like 20 lines of code, then people say, "Oh my God, there's so many files." Yeah, but each file is really, really small, and ideally, each little code file is fairly self-contained.
So that doesn't work.
If you're looking at that particular code file, ideally, you shouldn't have to be able to keep in your head all the rest of the hundreds of files. So that's one of the ideas with the single responsibility principle, is that we keep things small. And there will be a lot of files, there will be a lot of classes, and it looks scary, but it's really much easier to understand.
All right, see you later.
Sort of get over that problem.
So even if, let's say, the smaller files versus the larger file solution, even if the line number is the same, but the smaller files is more scary for people.
Yeah, that's my experience. Yeah.
But if you really apply that, at least based on my experience, when I split the files into the smaller ones and give them good namings, especially, for example, if it's a select layer, I have a certain suffix, so that my IDE would automatically, when I search with that suffix, then all these small files just listed down for me. And I know from the naming exactly what that file is for. So I don't need to go through everything. I don't need to scroll up and down, right?
Yeah.
So the search already helped me a lot.
Yeah. We haven't really talked about, I'm not a Salesforce developer. I do most of my software development, but at least the things that people pay me to is C# development. And we have this environment called Visual Studio, and it has a lot of navigation, features built into it. So if I'm looking at, a code listing and I wonder, what is another class doing? There's a button, it's just a keyboard shortcut I can press to, and then it just takes me to that file. So I don't even have to find the file in the file navigator. I can just sort of, navigate around the system. So I suppose you have something that's similar to that.
We're using Visual Studio Code, so which is
you do? Okay. Visual Studio Code does a lot of those things as well. True. Cool.
I think the first one, S, is more or less easier for us to understand because it's a concrete class and it's really simple to digest.
True.
The second one is O, which is open-close principle, right? What does that mean?
Yeah, so that means that the class should be open for extensibility but closed for modification. So originally it was defined in terms of object-oriented inheritance hierarchy. So the idea here was that you could have a base class, and if you did things right, then you shouldn't ever have to go back and change the code of the base class. Well, if you find a bug in it, fine, you can go and fix the bug. But otherwise, if ideally you could design the base class in such a way that if you needed to change some of its behaviors, there were enough hooks into it so that you can create a class that inherited from the base class, and then it overrides one of the
that doesn't even get hit.
And then
Oh God!
that way. And, when you have inheritance, which I believe you have in Apex as well, yeah, you can still do that. That's fine. Another approach to do this is to use the strategy pattern, where you basically just instead of creating an inheritance hierarchy, you can basically use dependency injection and say, well, there's an interface that you inject into the what was before the base class, and then it calls methods on that interface, and then you can always exchange one implementation of the interface with another one. But the basic idea with the open close principle is to say, well, okay, so once the base functionality has been developed, you shouldn't really have to go back and revisit that code, because you should be able to change further on behaviors by adding new classes. That sort of extend on the things that need to change, and I often find that quite useful in something like a business context, because what often happens is that you hinted at this already, that business rules change. So you often get this requirement from the rest of the business that they want you to implement that change of the business rule. But I've often found myself in a situation where it's a good idea to keep the old business rules around still. So instead of going in and editing the business rule so that you only have the new one, you can sort of, if at all possible, that leave the old business rules still in the code, but then have something that sits side by side. For example, maybe by extending a previous class, and changing enough of the way that things are done so that you now have the new business rule. But you often run into these things where sooner or later someone will come and ask you to run some calculations based on the old business rule, and it's really nice to be able to say, yeah, okay, I can do that. That class is still around, so I'm just going to use this class over there, which represents the old business rule, and then I can tell you, okay, this would be the result that we would have arrived at with the old business rule, and here's the result we can arrive with the new business rule. It doesn't come up a lot, but it happens, and it's just pretty nice to have those older things around.
It sounds a bit like you have a version controlling system embedded in your code.
Yes. Yeah. Well, okay. So I'm not saying you should keep all old code around. It's not. I don't mean that. But sometimes it might be useful.
I get the point. I just try to visualize it so people can really understand.
Fair enough. Yeah.
So when you have the base class, which is like a core of the original design, which is more kind of like abstracted, essential, and then the new things kind of grow on top of that.
If possible. Yeah. Yeah, that's the idea anyway. Yeah.
Okay, so the solid principle, the third one, is called the Liskov substitution principle. It's really a mouthful one, and it's a term that I throw around in the office, and people would think I'm smart.
This is
Liskov substitution.
So this is probably.
This was too junior, man. I want some advanced stuff. Yeah. I want to hold up. Can I paste this into I don't want to read it. I just want to listen to it. Hey, observer. Let's see. Will it let me just... Nope. Where can I just dump this? No, there should be a simple website where I can literally just dump this in here. it may be littered with ads, but I should be able to do something like, okay, so something like this.
The Dispassionate Developer by Mark Seaman. Caring for your craft is fine, but should you work for free?
Hold up. It doesn't sound right. I'm sorry. I need a mail.
This is a demo. Hello, I'm one of the voices you can use to speak.
Try again.
The Dispassionate Developer by Mark Seaman. Caring for your craft is fine, but should you work for free? I've met many passionate developers in my career. Programmers who are deeply interested in technology, programming languages, methodology, and self-I. This is a demo.
What just happened? Okay. I'm going to not spend any more time this morning trying to resolve the loading screen. And apparently that speech to texting didn't work, or text to speech didn't work. See if we can do it in here.
The Dispassionate
Oh my God. I need a male voice.
The Dispassionate Developer by Mark Seaman. Caring for your craft is fine, but should you work for free? I've met many passionate developers in my career. Programmers who are deeply interested in technology, programming languages, methodology, and self-improvement. I've also seen many online profiles where people present themselves as passionate developers. These are the people who organize and speak at user groups. They write blog posts and host podcasts. They contribute to open source development in their free time. I suppose that I can check many of those boxes myself. In the last few years, though, I've become increasingly skeptic that this is a good idea. Working for free hash. In the last 5 years or so, I've noticed what looks like a new trend. Programmers contact me to ask about paid mentorship. They offer to pay me out of their own pocket to mentor them. I find that flattering, but it also makes me increasingly disenchanted with the software development industry. To be clear, this isn't an attack on the good people who care so much about their craft that they are willing to spend their hard-earned cash on improving their skill. This is more a reflection on employers. For reasons that are complicated and that I don't fully understand, the software development community in the 80s and 90s developed a culture of anti-capitalism and liberal values that put technology on a pedestal for its own sake. Open source good, commercial software bad. Free software good, commercial software bad. I'm not entirely unsympathetic to such ideas, but it seems clear now that these ideas have had unintended consequences. The idea of free software, for example, has led to a software economy where you, the user, are no longer the customer, but the product. The idea of open source, too, seems largely defunct as a means of sticking it to the man. The big tech companies now embrace open source. Despite initial enmity towards open source, Microsoft now owns GitHub and is one of the most active contributors. Google and Facebook control popular front-end platforms such as Angular and React, as well as many other technologies such as Android or GraphQL. Continue the list at your own leisure. Developing open source is seen as a way to establish credibility, not only for companies, but for individuals as well. Would you like a cool job in tech? Show me your open source portfolio. Granted, the focus on open source contributions as a replacement for a CV seems to have peaked, and good riddance. I deliberately chose to use the word portfolio above. Like a struggling artist, you're expected to show up with such a stunning sample of your work that you amaze your potential new employer and blow away your competition. Unlike struggling artists, though, you've already given away everything in your portfolio, and so have other job applicants. Employers benefit from this. You work for free. The passion ethos hash. You're expected to contribute to open source software. Why? Because employers want employees who are passionate about their craft. As you start to ponder the implied ethos, the stranger it gets. Would you like engineers to be passionate as they design new bridges? Would you like a surgeon to be passionate as she operates on you? Would you like judges to be passionate as they pass sentence on your friend? I'd like such people to care about their vocation, but I'd prefer that they keep a cool head and make as rational decisions as possible. Why should programmers be passionate? I don't think that it's in our interest to be passionate, but it is in employers' interest. Not only are passionate people expected to work for free, they're also easier to manipulate. Tell a passionate person something he wants to hear, and he may turn off further critical thinking because the praise feels good. Some open source maintainers have created crucial software that runs everywhere. Companies make millions off that free software, while maintainers are often left with an increasing support burden and no money. They do, however, often get a pat on the back. They get invited to speak at conferences, and can add creator of XYZ to their social media bios. Until they burn out, that is. Passion, after all, comes from the Latin for suffering. Self-improvement hash. I remember consulting with a development organization, helping them adopt some new technology. As my engagement was winding down, I had a meeting with the manager to discuss how they should be able to carry on without me. This was back in my Microsoft days, so I suggested that they institute a training program for the employees. To give it structure, they could, for example, study for some Microsoft certifications. The development manager immediately shot down that idea. If we do that, they'll leave us once they have the certification. I was flabbergasted. You've probably seen quotes like this. What happens if we train our people and they leave? What happens if we don't and they stay? This is one of those bon mots that seem impossible to attribute to a particular source, but the idea is clear enough. The sentiment doesn't seem to represent mainstream behavior, though. Granted, I've met more than one visionary leader willing to invest in employees' careers, but most managers don't. While I teach and coach internationally, I naturally have more experience with my home region of Copenhagen, and more broadly Scandinavia. Here, it's a common position that anything that relates to work should only happen during work hours. If the employer doesn't allow training on the job, then most employees don't train. What happens if you don't keep up to date with new methodologies, new frameworks, new programming languages? Your skill set becomes obsolete. Not overnight, but over the years. Finding a new job becomes harder and harder. As your marketability atrophies, your employer can treat you worse and worse. After all, where are you going to go? If you're tired of working with legacy code without tests, most of your suggestions for improvements will be met by a shrug. We don't have time for that now.
Yep.
It's more important to deliver value to the customer. You'll have to work long hours and weekends firefighting unexpected issues in production while still meeting deadlines. A sufficiently cynical employer may have no qualms keeping employees busy this way. To be clear, I'm not saying that it's good business sense to treat skilled employees like this, and I'm not saying that this is how all employers conduct business, but I've seen enough development organizations that fit the description. As disappointing as it may be, keeping up to date with technology is your responsibility, and if you can't sneak in some time for self-improvement at work, you'll have to do it on your own time. This has little to do with passion, but much to do with self-preservation. Can I help you? The programmers who contact me, and others, for mentorship are the enlightened ones who've already figured this out. That doesn't mean that I'm comfortable taking people's hard-earned money. If I teach you something that improves your productivity, your employer benefits too. I think that your employer should pay for that. I'm aware that most companies don't want to do that. It's also my experience that while most employers couldn't care less whether you pay me for mentorship, they don't want you to show me their code. This basically means that I can't really mentor you unless you can reproduce the problems you're having as anonymized code examples. But if you can do that, you can ask the whole internet. You can try asking on Stack Overflow and then ping me. You're also welcome to ask me. If your minimal working example is interesting, I may turn it into a blog post, and you pay nothing. People also ask me how they convince their managers or colleagues to do things differently. I often wonder why they don't make technical decisions already, but this may be my cultural bias talking. In Denmark, you can often get away with the ask for forgiveness rather than permission attitude, but it may not be a good idea in your culture. Can I magically convince your manager to do things differently? Not magically, but I do know an effective trick: get him or her to hire me or another expensive consultant. Most people don't heed advice given for free, but if they pay dearly for it, they tend to pay attention.
Yeah.
Other than that, I can only help you as I've passionately tried to help the worldwide community for decades by blogging, answering questions on Stack Overflow, writing books, speaking at user groups and conferences, publishing videos, and so on. Ticking most of the boxes hash. Yes, I know that I fit the mold of the passionate developer. I've blogged regularly since 2006, I've answered thousands of questions on Stack Overflow, I've given more than 100 presentations, been a podcast guest, and co-written a book, none of which has made me rich. If I don't do it for the passion, then why do I do it? Sometimes it's hard and tedious work, but even so, I do much of it because I can't really help it. I like to write and teach. I suppose that makes me passionate. My point with this article isn't that there's anything wrong with being passionate about software development. The point is that you might want to regard it as a weakness rather than an asset. If you are passionate, beware that someone doesn't take advantage of you. I realized that I didn't view the world like this when I started blogging in January 2006. I was driven by my passion. In retrospect, though, I think that I have been both privileged and fortunate. I'm not sure my career path is reproducible today. When I started blogging, it was a newfangled thing. Just the fact that you blogged was enough to you get a little attention. I was in the right place at the right time. The same is true for Stack Overflow. The site was still fairly new when I started, and a lot of frequently asked questions were only asked on my watch. I still get upvotes on answers from 2009, because these are questions that people still ask. I was just lucky enough to be around the first time it was asked on the site. I'm also privileged by being an able-bodied man born into the middle class in one of the world's richest countries. I received a free education. Denmark has free healthcare and generous social security. Taking some chances with your career in such an environment isn't even reckless. I've worked for more than one startup. That's not risky here. Twice I've worked for a company that went out of business. In none of those cases did I lose money. Yes, I've been fortunate, but my point is that you should probably not use my career as a model for yours, just as you shouldn't use those of Robert C. Martin Kent Beck or Martin Fowler. It's hardly a reproducible career path. Conclusion hash. What can you do, then, if you want to stand out from the crowd? How do you advance your software development career? I don't know. I never claimed that this was easy.
What if I do a
Being good at something helps, but you must also
pause?
make sure that the right people know what you're good at. You're probably still going to have to invest some of your free time to make that happen. Just beware that you aren't being taken advantage of. Be dispassionate.
I want to fix this thing, man. I don't know how. What if I do a task delay 1. And hold up, I have to do 1,000. More than likely it's 1,000, right? Milliseconds, yeah. No, I don't want to. This is ugly, but I'm just trying to figure out what it takes for this page to load the very first time instead of me having to suspend it, bring it back, and then it loads. Let's see if that does anything. Nope. Like, honestly, I have no clue. I don't know. What was the original problem I was trying to solve? Mm, mm. It's this right here. I'm not sure how to do this. I might have to take another break. And then again, I really didn't get that much accomplished in this session. I mean, I did some refactoring, or some renaming. There's a restaurants view model, and there needs to be a carrier view model. If we just go to the constructor of that carrier view model, I guess it looks something like that. We can set offerings is right here, in which it by default is looking for some this right here looks like comment that out. And where's restaurants being set at? And initialize. So we can say that this is initialize restaurant view model. Y'all know it looks ugly, doesn't it? Oh. Then we could do something similar, say void initialize carrier view model. Put that right there. Okay. Now this, and that's restaurants view model. Now there's some differences. I'm almost positive this is different dependencies. Yeah, it's different. Okay. This would be called restaurant dependencies. that. This would have to be carrier dependencies. Carrier dependencies. I don't like this code. Where am I at? Hey, Gamlor. Gamlor, you've been observing me working on this customer app, and I don't like this code at all. The Courier app is pleasant to work in. It's pretty straightforward. This customer app was the first app that I started building for this entire solution, and it's nasty, man. When was the last time you wrote some nasty code? I want to know when you wrote some nasty code that you're willing to admit was nasty. Operations.dependencies for core dependencies. That's operations.dependencies for core dependencies. Should be operation core dependencies. And this would be your carrier dependencies. I don't know what this category thing is supposed to be. Where's the commented out code? There was a commented out code. No. Where is it at? Hold up. So you write nasty code once in a while. Okay. Where this is so messy, man. I can't even find the code that I was referencing. Hold up. Man, this code sucks, man. Dependencies. It's this right here. Is that it? Hold up. Let's get menu dependencies. Yeah, that's menu dependencies. It should be like one word, right? I thought I was getting carrier dependencies. It must be the wrong word. Oh, it's this right here. Okay. Found it. Okay. So let me comment that out. Let me go up here. Do that. It still wants a category. I'll tell you that I'm not a fan of this code. This category is, give me a second. Category dot, can I say new category? Category equals new category. Can I do that? How do you initialize category? What was the namespace for it? Crap. It's shoppingcart.core.category is the namespace. Bar blah equals shopping cart dot core dot category. Say other. Would that do anything? Would that work? It does work. Okay. Okay. How do I simplify this? Do that. Hey, you. And I'm about to hop off. I gotta go. See ya. Bye.